Welcome to the AFR Saints channel, where we provide you daily content on your favorite team, the New Orleans Saints. Do us a favor and hit that subscribe button. Be sure to leave your comments below and smash that like button. Who dat? It's going to be a busy offseason for the New Orleans Saints. Feels like a very pivotal offseason. Our friend Kat Terrell, good enough to spend a couple of minutes with us here. Kat, how are you?
I'm doing great. I wish it was still the weekend, but other than that, it's going great.
Don't we all? Maybe not so great for the Saints organization right now as they head into this offseason. You have a really extensive piece up right now at ESPN.com, or you're a contributor to a really extensive piece about the offseason. Put a big picture umbrella over this offseason, Kat. What is the general sentiment about the direction of the organization as they head into this offseason, which feels really pivotal?
Yeah, it feels to me like it's an offseason of not enough change, and yet change coming in ways that fans probably aren't going to be happy about. It's interesting that the biggest questions are about whether some of these star players are coming back, even though they're under contract. But, other than that, on the, coaching side, it just feels like it's kind of status quo. So it's a weird offseason. Not a lot of big free agents, but yet there could be a lot of change on the roster. It kind of just feels up in the air and also like the team's treading water, if that makes sense.
Yeah, it does. It's a bizarre juxtaposition where they are right now. I'll get to the players in a second. Let me talk about staff. Any feeling as to how this direction is going right now with offensive coordinator?
No, it's been really quiet the last few days. I feel like we're going to have to know something this week. This is usually when the Saints make these types of decisions, either heading into Senior Bowl week or right after. And, as people know, that's kind of kicking off today in Mobile. The Saints usually send a pretty large contingent out there. But I think the worst thing that they can do is if they can't get any of these big names and just fall back on someone who's already on staff or something like that, because I think the team really needs a reason to ignite this fan base and get them back on their side. And that's just not going to do it if that ends up being how things go.
Yeah. Are they waiting to interview Greasy and Kubiak with the 49ers? Obviously, they're still playing.
Well, I think that they would be able to interview them this week, right?
Okay.
They can do I think they can do the interviews on the off week before all the Super Bowl stuff starts up this week. I have to look into, because it's been a long time since the Saints hired an offensive coordinator. But generally, I believe it would happen on the off week.
Kat Terrell's with us. She's on Twitter at @Kat_Terrell, ESPN.com Saints reporter. I'm sure you saw the Michael Thomas Twitter.
Of course.
What do we call it? Spat, whatever. I'll oversimplify. Thomas took
airing of grievances.
Yeah, sure. He took shots at Derek Carr, at the organization as a whole. Is he done in New Orleans?
He has to be after that. This is not the first time that he's done that. He did it, as anyone paying attention at the time knows, he did it during a game. However, I guess the comments he tweeted during that game when he was on IR were vague enough that he brushed them off. I'm not saying it wasn't a big deal, but maybe you could. These were extremely pointed, saying he would have had 1,000 yards if he had gotten better passes this way. They never passed to him, saying no one wants to be the offensive coordinator there. That's extremely pointed, and if a player is airing that out, really, it shows that either he doesn't care or he doesn't think that there will be any consequences for that happening.
Yeah, there's no fear of any type of repercussions.
Yeah, exactly.
And so it feels like he's already got a foot out of the door. What does this mean for his contract, Kat? Because as I understand it, he's got a $10 million cap and $18 million in dead money. So are they just going to eat $18 million and send him on his way?
Well, the contract was always a little weird because technically he's not a free agent, but it's the same situation as last year. He's got these major roster bonuses built in if he's still on the roster on the third day of the league year, which I think is, I'm probably about to say this wrong. I think it's March 16th or 17th.
You mean you didn't memorize every player's contract, Kat? What's wrong with you? You call yourself a journalist?
I didn't memorize the date free agency starts, which I should because it's going to run my life very soon.
Right.
Regardless, the Saints aren't paying him $150 million in roster bonuses. I'm actually doing a piece pretty soon that I usually do every year, and it breaks down the cap hits and what would it mean if they cut such and such players. Michael Thomas would have to be someone that would be a post-June first cut, I believe. Yeah. I mean, the thing is you can only do two of those. So, how many... Jameis Winston would probably also be a post-June first cut. I don't know. I'm kind of interested to see how they break this down because if they want to part ways with all these players, it's not going to be cheap. It never is.
Yeah, it's why it's such a weird offseason, right? It feels like, well, you are. I mean, you were so close to winning the division and being a playoff team, but you feel so far away. So as they and Kat Terrell's here for a couple more minutes as they go into this week's Senior Bowl and Combine and Pro Days and all that stuff toward the draft. Where do you identify the biggest needs that the Saints have?
Well, here's the problem. We're talking about them cutting these players and accruing dead money, which, is money they cannot spend in free agency on other players. So they'll get under the cap as always, but they probably won't have a ton to spend. And they desperately need to fix both their offensive line and their defensive line, which if you do it in free agency, it's not cheap. You don't just go find left tackles hanging out on the street for peanuts. The Saints have done okay with kind of finding bargains. Like James Hurst was a bargain. But that's where they have to start. They have to fix the offensive line. A lot of issues there, a lot of question marks. Still don't know Ryan Ramczyk's status. And then they have to find a pass rush. They need to find the next Cam Jordan, and that probably is going to have to happen in the draft somehow. So they love the Senior Bowl. They love picking players that play in the Senior Bowl. So I'm sure at least one player that plays this week will end up on the Saints roster. I
mean, well, of course, Trevor Penning a couple of years ago was one of the guys that splashed at the Senior Bowl.
Right.
He's been a giant miss, which is why offensive line still remains a big need for the Saints right now. And you mentioned pass rush. If only they had drafted someone like, I don't know, Trey Hendrickson. That would have been great if that could happen. Guy was second in the NFL.
But that's where the cap issues.
Right.
That is where the cap issues come into play. You can say the Saints always get under the cap and they make it worse. Of course, they make it worse. But Trey Hendrickson was absolutely of the management of the cap. That was one where, some of the other players, they have like a hard line. They don't want to cross in terms of money. Marcus Williams was one of them. They instead signed two players for the same price as him. Trey Hendrickson was probably the biggest casualty of their cap space, and that's really unfortunate because a few years later we see how much they could have used them, just like you said.
They make it worse. Was that a Freudian slip?
Oh, maybe. I mean,
it had to be. It's
going to be rough for a few years.
Is a couple more for you, Kat. And Kat Terrell's our guest on Twitter at @Kat_Terrell, ESPN.com. You'll give her a follow. We know they're proceeding with Derek Carr. They have to. Do you get the sense around the organization that they are all in to try to win with Derek Carr? Or is this sort of a bridge year to what they feel the future of the organization will be?
Well, I think that really the big tell is going to be whether they restructure his contract. I think they have to. Right now, looking at that is a giant salary cap spreadsheet. Because I'm a giant nerd. I think they're $80 million over the cap. It might be 70. We don't know the exact number, but the projection is $80 million over the contract. So if they restructure Derek Carr, that means essentially pushing out here before they can cut him without major financial implications. Mm-hmm. The salary is guaranteed, so they're paying him no matter what. But the thing is, I truly do believe that Mickey Loomis and Derek Carr. See, I can't talk today. Mickey Loomis and Dennis Allen are all in on Derek Carr, and I would hope that Derek Carr is also all in on Derek Carr. But they have supported him consistently. No matter what we asked over the course of the season, they've said Derek Carr, a lot of people thought at the end of the season they were going to say they thought he was injured, then he left. That's exactly what they said. So, taking it all at face value, yeah, I feel like they believe that he's the guy for a while.
She's Kat Terrell, Saints reporter over at ESPN.com, and of course on Twitter at @Kat_Terrell. Always appreciate the insight. Thanks for a few minutes.
Me on.
Hey, thanks so much for watching. Please leave your comments. I love to interact, and be sure to hit the red subscribe button below.